the Demeter, out at sea with no land in sight.
This story takes place on this merchant ship, the Demeter.
We started our voyage doing the interiors of the ship in Berlin. It's a fantastic studio.
We had one set, it was on rockers that went back and forth. Everyone's kind of getting seasick, but we're on the set.
And then we had to shift this huge company of people to the island of Malta.
It's the biggest ship that's ever been built in Malta. It's 180 feet long. Yeah, it's a huge achievement.
And we have this infinity tank that looks out into the Mediterranean. And so they built the exterior of the ship in this tank.
We want to give the cast the best performance opportunity they can, you know? And so to build it where you can see the water will, you know, help inform the performances and give you a much better movie.
He's coming!
It's got a massive barges full of air tanks, which when we fill them with water and air at the same time, make the ship list from the port to starboard.
Evil is on board. Powerful evil.
I wanted the ship to feel dirty and real. It was built with old material to make sure that it felt grounded.
Had all the ropes made, all the pulleys made, so it really is sort of endless detail.
We had this whole set that we could make our playground, and that scale really does help in creating that world.
May God have mercy on us all.
I mean, yeah, that's... I never understand how I get the opportunity to direct any film, but I think that I was working with Brad Fisher on another movie called A Long Walk, which didn't go, and he had this script, and he had this deal with Amblin about making it, and they were looking for a director, and we started talking about it, and it was just a wonderful opportunity to just get into a classical movie about Dracula. I mean, so I completely fell in love with this project immediately. It was like, how could I, you know, to even just get to be in conversation about it was thrilling. I mean, he's the ultimate villain in fiction, and he's pure evil, but he's also driven by a very basic need that we all have. I mean, obviously in his particular case, it's about blood, but it can be related. It can be, you know, compared to many other things. And I found that to be such a fascinating aspect to a person who is actually sophisticated and an aristocrat on one side, and then can just turn into this monster and literal. And this is what we aimed at, making him literally a monster. You know, when the needs to be that comes up. So. Yeah, I found him to be one of the most complex and intriguing characters in the world, you know, in fiction. Well, that's wonderful. If that's what you see, then that's great. That's a relief, because that is what we were trying to do. It is trying to make Dracula as scary as possible, because a lot of the Dracula movies that have been in the past have been Gothic, or they have a sense of romance, or they've had all these aspects to them, but to just make Dracula into just pure horror hasn't really been done much before, and at least not for decades. And I just wanted to embrace that opportunity to create a pure, raw horror movie with Dracula at its center. Yeah, no, I mean, all credit to Brage Schott for creating that script, who wrote the original draft, because he saw that. He saw that this is just such a contained, wonderful story all on its own. And yes, you have the blueprints for the story in the captain's log in the novel, but you don't know exactly what you're saying. You don't know what actually happened between those log entries. So that is a huge, vast, wonderful opportunity to create a story about the human beings who are just mentioned as names in the novel, and tell how they are in peril, because that's what's so wonderful, is that you see Dracula from a point of view of just a regular human being, not from the point of view of Van Helsing or somebody who is close to Dracula. To them, he's just this distant monster that just came into their world to destroy it. Yeah, and that's such an aspect of a horror, the horror genre, that you can create all this tension in a very short, a very small environment. But in this case, what I loved about it, compared to other movies I've done, is that the small space is actually huge. you're out in the ocean, out in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. So it is, or for the most part, and it's vast and it's contained at the same time, and I think that's visually very intriguing. I mean, having been around Guillermo del Toro, his mind has of course influenced me. Obviously his movies do, but also the way he sees how to use light and sets and camera angles, and you can study his films. But also, you know, Spielberg's movies are always such, even in the most suspenseful moments, they have such warmth. And I think the humanity always comes through regardless of the spectacle. And I think that's been an influence. But I think also David Fincher, with his stark, cold, very clean visual style, is also has influenced my horror filmmaking, because I love the classical story, the classical use of camera, the classical use of light, and the whole 9 yards. I mean, the captain is obviously he has a responsibility. How does he handle his responsibility facing something he doesn't know anything about? Is he able to remain the captain of the ship? Is he able to steer the crew as a group to fight the enemy? Because he's not really a soldier; he's a captain of a boat. And so that became a very big aspect to his character, in my opinion. That it was about his abilities to handle his crew in the situation up against this. And Liam brings gravitas. He brings nuance. He brings a performance level that just elevates everything he's in. So, and also as an actor on set, he's so warm and he's so including and he's so helpful. And it's being around these amazing actors is just a joy. Yeah, he's brilliant. I mean, he's such a thoughtful actor, and he digs really deep and comes up with great ideas for how to nuance moments and how to portray these things. He's such a great performer. He can deliver a performance in one take, and then he can work it a little bit differently in the next take, and he takes direction so well. And he's also very strong as an actor. He knows what he wants, and it's just but he also brings a warmth and a humanity and a vulnerability in the beginning of the film that can be used as a strength later in the film. So he's just one of those amazing actors. Yeah. I mean, he wins everyone over because he's also facing something that is entirely unimaginable to a scientific mind, a doctor, that he's learned that everything is grounded, and then faced with this devil, he has to actually come to terms with that the world is not what he expected it to be. And that's kind of the big theme in the movie in many ways. And that comes through his character. And that's something I love about the script, is that the theme of the film comes through the discovery of the character. Yeah, he's such a great actor. He's such a joy to work with. He's so profoundly present in the character. He loves the genre like very few others. He's obsessed with, and he was obsessed with Dracula. I mean, he loves the character from before we even got to meet, talk about it. And he spent actually a while on a ship, a year or something of his life, if not more. So he really knew how to handle himself on the ship as well. So those kind of things come out very well on screen. But he has an intensity about him that I love, and he has a screen presence that is just almost underused, in my opinion. I mean, Edward Thomas, who is the production designer, he and I talked about the basic layout in the beginning, because we needed the story to work logically according to the way the script was written, and we needed to start placing the rooms in accordance to how it needs to be to function in the story. And then, it was always the idea that the cargo hold was this big belly of the beast, and that's where, that's what it's all gonna be about. And it had to be a schooner because that's the way it's described in the novel. So then you have some parameters for what kind of ship you're doing. But I wanted it to be huge. I mean, like a big schooner with 3 masts and because we needed all the space for the actors to be able to play, and for me to be able to create tension, spatial tension, and create unreliable environments that the actors could be scared in, basically. It was great. I mean, we had amazing crews, amazing set designers, and people in every department. I cannot, say good enough things about the German crew creating the ship, both interior, and then we went to Malta, and we built the whole exterior of the ship with real wood, and and it was just this. It was practically a real ship. And it was just, and in a way, for any normal-sized movie, it was an enormous endeavor to do that. Most of these seafaring movies cost much more than ours, Yeah, and I always wanted the evolution. I wanted to follow the story of Dracula, but not show him. That's a really tricky prospect, because you can't show what you need to tell. So, but we in the end, he is a very old man who is in us over 400 years old, and I really wanted to see that on him. I wanted to feel his age. I didn't want him to be sexy or a suave kind of version of Dracula at all. I wanted him to be somebody who's lived with this in this horrific lifestyle that obviously he does, and he's frail. He's really desperate for blood. When he loses his blood supply, he needs to just, he's in a desperate situation until he's able to kill the first crew member. And I wanted to try to tell that story, and how he then, as he gains power, he's then able to again gain the power to recreate the demon within him, have it manifest. And that demon needed to be part bat, part demon, because the bat part of a vampire is really intriguing, and I wanted to make sure, and with the producer, Brad Fisher, he also was a big part of this, creating this with the designers and everybody, where everything had to be biological, like the way the arms are, and the way the flip, the arm would turn into a whole extended wing, and how the eyes would work, and how he flies and moves and lands and all that stuff. We were studying bats and bats and bats. So yeah, it's incredible. I mean, he's absolutely amazing, and he's such a trooper on set. He knows what it takes to do these kind of difficult parts, and it's so hard on him. And if you see the behind-the-scenes stuff or something, you see what a terrible situation he's constantly in physically to be able to do this. But he's so agile, he's so friendly, he's so, even in the most, in middle of the night when it's all, we've been there for hours and hours, and he was there 4 hours before us because he was in a makeup chair getting ready. He's still, there's still a smile on his face. He's still able to work with the character and the needs of the scene. I mean, I think that this is like Alien. It's just that it's on a ship in 1897, and the creature is Dracula, and it's scary. I've been trying to make the scariest portrayal of Dracula in ages. That's been my goal, and I just hope that the audience embraces that. Yeah.
It's a return to form of just classic old school filmmaking that, Universal and Amblin are just incredibly skilled at, and the thing that I think separates them from honestly just the other studios in terms of monster and also just old school filmmaking. The practicality of it, or the practical nature of it, like the from the sets to the locations, and also André Øvredal's vision. Like, we sat and we talked about it, and I just felt like he was incredibly collaborative, generous, and had a point of view about this thing and how to actually shoot it, because it is a bit of a monster, for lack of a better word, of a film to make. So you know, and there's a lot of pressure, but he didn't operate with that pressure on set. And so I just thought it was a good opportunity to come back, and then also to be able to play this particular character was just fascinating for me. I thought it felt like an old school, like that character, like a character thriller, like a character piece. I felt like the script was, and it, you know, it went through changes as we went through it, but I felt like it was character driven, and one of those characters being Dracula. So Dracula wasn't just this crazy, this mindless animal. You know, Dracula is very much he's still a monster in this version. But he's not the monster that we're used to. And I think that was the appeal, because we haven't seen it before, you know? Oh, Clemens is he's a legend in my eyes. No, he's this Cambridge educated Black doctor who, for me, was an opportunity to tell that story, because these men existed during that time. And, but also he represents something in this film that isn't often seen in the horror genre. And so to be able to be a Black lead and be also the person who doubts, you watch his journey, he sort of doubts the supernatural because he's a man of science, and he's a man who, you know, doesn't believe in myths and all of that until he's confronted with this thing that he can't escape, literally can't escape. And I just thought it was important to tell that story and to watch his journey and his evolution in the same way you watch Dracula's journey and evolution throughout the thing, you know? Dracula is learning about human nature. You can tell with the knocking, right, and how he's playing with these people, these sailors, and toying with them. And then you have, you know, Clemens, who is also journeying from this doctor to this hunter, and he makes a decision and he goes for it. He has to. So yeah. Well, he wins them over. Not, you know, he doesn't try to win them. Like, that's the thing. That's the thing I do like about that, is that he's not here to necessarily make friends. You know, he's here to get to London, and he'll do what he needs to do on the ship, but he's not here to appease anybody on that boat. The reason he wins them over is because they see the man, and they see how he's able to adapt, and they see that they also have no choice but to listen to him because he's also the conduit to Anna, played by Aisling, who is incredible. In order for them to understand this monster, they have to understand her, but they don't know how to do. They're not equipped to do that because they don't believe in women on you know, back then it was taboo, and so. Clemens is a bit of a conduit to her, and then also a conduit to Dracula as well. They're all outsiders, those three. And there's a bit of they see that in each other, I think. And so, yeah, he does ultimately win them over. It's not an easy task, but if they want to survive, they have to learn how to depend on each other, because they also have to find a way to sail this huge cargo ship across the Aegean. And that is also no easy task. So they have to bond. They have to figure it out. And I'll say they gain a respect for each other. He's incredible. Liam Cunningham, come on, man. He's like legend and also a leader on set as well. And so in being a leader on set and his career and everything, we had a lot of fun just offset too, you know what I mean, and just explored Malta and Berlin and all that good stuff. But I think Clemens and the captain also see something in each other. I think the captain sees the leader in Clemens before Clemens sees it. And I think he's the only one who's able to see that, whereas Vojcik can't see that. He hasn't risen to that station yet. And yeah, I just think there's a respect there that the captain has, because he has a bit more of the world view. He understands Clemens' station in the world and what he's fighting against, because he's seen it, you know, and he has the wisdom and the age to reflect that, whereas some of the younger crew members, you know, are a product of their environment. Oh, it's tense. It's it's fraught with tension, but because again, Vojcik is he's right under the captain, and he's constantly being subverted by by Clemens, who is making, in my estimation, all the right decisions. But Vojcik, is banking on Clemens failing and not, Clemens, is given the opportunity to lead by the captain. And it skips over Vojcik, and he sees that power being taken away. But it's also great working with David, because offset outside of that, like on screen we're like this, but off screen we're just it had so much fun. Berlin is an incredible city. Malta is beautiful. We had I had the time of my life. Like I literally was just, and it was in the middle of COVID, I will say that, but it was like one of those times where we were in a bubble and we had to be very careful, and so you have to make the most of it. And we did all of our interiors in Berlin, and we did all of our exteriors, or most of them, in Malta. And again, the sets were incredible. I think the original Nosferatu film might have been Murnau's film was shot in the same studio that we were in Berlin, in Germany, which I thought was a cool piece of like history. Kind of blessed the set as we were starting. But yeah, it was cool. It's hard to shoot a film like this that's such a tight, condensed narrative and like a horror genre with tension over the course of as many months as we did in what seems to be one location. But again, we took our crew from Berlin to Malta. We just had a great time. It was good. Awesome. Yeah, as they say, this ain't your mama's Dracula. This is a new version of it, but it's also a throwback again to old school filmmaking. Not necessarily that film, but it's the monster, it's the thing of he's intelligent but he's also really scary, and I think we've gotten used to a lot of vampire stories being very suave and sleek and sexy, and this version of Dracula is not that. He's scary and in your face, and it makes you uncomfortable in a really interesting way. Yeah, he's incredible. Javier Botet is insanely talented. I mean, he's a legend, right? Like he's done so many different roles in that in the monster universe, I guess, and he just brings another level of skill to it that I think is hard to emulate. Like he just gets it. Javier is like, and he's also just funny, man. Like the other good part of shooting in Malta is we got to like go, actually get on a boat and go out to sea and go have fun and stuff like that. And I just remember like seeing him offset is so different than being on set with him. 'Cause he's just such a fun guy to be around, cool, and we just had a great time. It was like camp almost, making this unique, thriller. Well, it was weird because when between action and cut, it's scary as hell, and then he called cut, and then he's trying to mumble something, but you can't understand it because his mask is blocking him, and he's trying to stuff food through his mask, and he has the eye holes cut out, but it's like, oh man, it was weird and scary. But again, between action and cut, he has this like physical nature of Dracula, that whole physical language. Even in the trailer, there's this moment where you see Dracula crawling above Toby, little Toby. And that was how I remember watching that scene that day and watching him do that and being like, oh, that's gonna make the trailer. Or like that is incredible. Like it's what nightmares are made of, Andre's vision was one of the main reasons I got on board. We had a long Zoom call and met, and then I just wanted to be a part of whatever his vision was, because I had seen his other films. I remember with Troll Hunter and Autobiography of Jane Doe, and I just knew that he was the person to actually bring this to life. And I think he did it just incredibly well, managing the challenges of trying to make a film like this and the pressure of trying to make a film like this. But all we had to do was trust him, and all he had to do was trust us to do our jobs. And you have to trust the creative. He got the right creative people around to make these incredible sets, and the throwback to it all, and his mentors, Guillermo del Toro, and so he comes from that as well. And it was really cool. It was just really cool. Fun, and also very challenging, because I like doing stunts, but if I have a stunt double, I'm gonna let him do his job. I'm gonna let him do his job. But a lot of it had to, again, be practical. Like André needed the camera right in your face once you land from getting thrown by Dracula or whatever that was. And it was cool because, especially the ending sequence, we were, there was a lot of just really digging to figure out what would actually happen. How do you actually make this work? Given the environment, given what's actually happening right now versus what might have been envisioned in a script or whatever. But everything really matched mostly his vision. It was just about executing it. But I tell you, those stunts and all of that stuff was a pleasure to shoot, but it was also crazy. The water and just being in the water. I remember at one point, André, I don't swim, so we put buoys under my costume, and I'm sitting there acting, trying to we had just jumped off the boat into the waves and everything. I'm sitting there acting, and the buoys, you could just see the buoys slip out from under my clothes, and oh man, that was just the funniest thing. The crew's just laughing. I'm sitting there acting, trying to, and they're we can't use any of that because all of your lifeguard stuff is just flying out of you. It was too funny. But yeah, it was a joy to shoot those sequences. With just reverence and respect for my cast, I just want to shout them out because this is one of the best ensemble international casts I've worked with. And they're all incredible. I mean, you're talking about Emmy winners, and Olivier winners, and all sorts of just theater actors as well. Just great and good people. We actually hung out on set and off set, and just had a good time. And I thank them because it's not an easy movie to get through, because a lot of challenges and it's very dark. But offset, we were able to, keep it fun. And so I just look back with fondness on them because they make this movie. It's a character piece. And so without a cast like this, you would be, we wouldn't have gotten as far as we did.
So imagine there I was, I'm a little boy, I grew up in Kansas, which is the heart of the Midwest in the United States. Very religious community, pretty conservative community, and I used to sneak downstairs late on Friday nights to watch what we called the creature feature. Ours was called the Friday Nightmare, hosted by a woman called Crematia Mortem, and she would host and introduce us to, and then do little bits in between about with all the classic horror cinema. So the Universal Pictures movies, Dracula, Frankenstein, my favorites, Dracula, The Invisible Man, Jekyll, I mean, all of the things that we knew as kids, those iconic images, I was just hypnotized by in film. And then over the subsequent years, had been hooked ever since. So then I fell in love with all of the Hammer versions of Dracula, as well as the subsequent adaptations, as well as classic German variations on the Dracula cinematic story. So as horror continued to play such an important role in my life as a storyteller, and as I myself was writing my own films and stories and comic books about monsters and starting to wrestle with bigger ideas about my own mortality and my own struggles with addiction, all the way to mental illness, all the way to the fears that we all face collectively and as individuals, I found that the genre space, and horror in particular, is such an incredible way to explore and wrestle with those ideas. And Dracula, the character, the figure, the representation of all the horror that it is, from Stoker to today, it continues to strike people in the heart because it represents our fear of the end and the seductiveness of being able to live forever. And ultimately, in this story, we deal with a confrontation where the need, the thirst, the hunger for that Dracula has turned into a bestial kind of predatory horror. And so I read the script. I desperately wanted to be a part of the film. I was fortunate enough to be cast in it. And I stepped foot in Germany, in Babelsberg Studios, on the set of a Dracula picture, a Universal Studios Dracula picture. And I got tears in my eyes. I'll never forget. I was by myself, and I had gone to a fitting, and I'd seen Carlo and the rest of the amazing wardrobe team's versions of what I would look like, and I'd seen glimpses of Andre's shots and lists and images, and then I was on set, and I was about to get a tour of our ship, and I was very moved, and yeah, it's a surreal thing. Vojcik for me was a character unlike anything I'd ever gotten to play before, and I cared deeply for him as I was first reading the script, and I felt like I knew and understood what the engine was inside of him, because there is a deep longing and sadness in Vojcik for belonging and for purpose, and I believe that he was a person who had no real family to speak of and found the family of the crew and the boat at a very young age, and has spent the totality of his life at sea. And I loved that André was so supportive of this instinct that I had about the character, that the ship is so important to Vojcik that it is a person to him. It is more than a home to him. It is everything to him. And so I wanted to constantly be tending to her in a way that you would a person or a relationship that you cared very deeply for. I believed instinctively upon reading the script and building the character that when we would come into port after a long trip at sea and everyone would go to have a good meal or go out to celebrate or get drunk or go to a show, I would stay on board, constantly tending to all the little repairs and details and improvements that I could upon this ship. I love the idea that a character could love something this much, and when it becomes threatened, have to raise my stakes, to the point of not just survival for myself, but for this thing that to me represents all that matters in life, as well as my crew. Because the film begins, and here's my hero. Here is the person who's given me this life, my captain, who I've been sailing under now for a long time. And he's telling me, look, this is my last journey. I am not going to be a captain after we get to London. He tells me this. You are going to be the captain. He's giving me the greatest honor I could possibly ever ask for. And I'm so proud. Like, my whole life has been leading to this moment, and it's a dream I never thought I would achieve. And within one day, it becomes threatened as people start disappearing, and we start to recognize that there is a force on board that's preying upon not only my fellow sailors, but also the ship itself. And man, those are great gifts as an actor. That's something that you can really, for lack of a better phrase, sink your teeth into. Sure, I knew going into this that Vojcik moved and existed in space quite differently than I do as David. I'm an incredibly expressive person. I use my hands. I gesture a lot. I am fairly verbose, if not ever eloquent. And Vojcik is just a man of so few words, and his presence, because of the years of working on the deck of a ship and the way that he's had to labor, it's hard work living on a boat and being a sailor, had caused his body to become a pretty incredible machine. And so I worked out quite a bit. I gained quite a bit of weight. I tried to bulk up on muscle mass. And I then started to work with this incredible dialect coach, who became a dear friend, my friend Marcel, who's in Poland, in Krakow, and they and I would meet almost every day to help me go through my lines and make sure I was getting my Polish right. And then you just find the way that you move in space, the way that he walks, the way that he stands, the way that he thinks, the way that his eyes move when he's thinking. And I can feel it now starting to come back into my body. It's weird. I haven't been there for such a long time, but it was intense. It required a lot, but it was great. I loved every second of that part of the work. Absolutely. So Clemens, here comes Clemens, this guy who is an outsider. He's educated, and it's tricky because Vojcik is in charge of helping to crew up his ship for this journey. The captain has put me in charge of crewing up this ship, and I want the best sailors, the most experienced, the most rugged. Clemens has soft hands. He's also non-white, and at that time, as it is today, obviously, racism is a massive, disease in our world. But imagine for a guy like Vojcik, who has an all-white crew and is used to being the boss of people, and having a guy who's not white, who's smarter than me, who's more educated than me, and the worst thing about it, my captain, my hero, the guy whose opinion that matters the most to me, really likes this guy. And they can have these really sophisticated conversations that I don't get to participate in. So what was really cool about that as an actor and as a character is it motivated this distrust of Clemens, this dislike of Clemens. I wanted Clemens to fail. I wanted to be, making sure that he knew that I was in charge. And Corey Hawkins, who brings Clemens to life, does such a phenomenal job with him that over the course of the story, not only do I start to realize that I am completely wrong about this guy, that he does have answers and he is the person that I can look to, I become dependent upon him. And what a cool journey that is to take as an actor and get to bring that to life and hopefully demonstrate, to anyone watching the story unfold, what a foolish thing it is to make judgments about people based upon things like that and not giving them a chance. Because perhaps maybe if Vojcik had listened to Clemens earlier, things might not have gone the way that they do. Well, I've been so very fortunate, very blessed. I've gotten to work with some of the great directors of our time. And Andre's work grabbed me by the little monster kid heart a long time ago. The first time I saw Troll Hunter, I remember saying, this guy, whoever made this movie, is really, really good. Then you see a film like The Autopsy of Jane Doe, and you're like, I've never seen a movie like that before. I knew that whoever made that film was somebody very special. He also adapted one of my favorite books as a kid for a big studio picture, which was Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which I loved. I went and saw it as a matinee while I was filming The Suicide Squad. I'll never forget. And I sat in the theater. I was like, gosh, I really love this guy. So the fact that I get to be in Andre's vision of a Dracula film and knowing Andre's monster kid heart that has, been pounding in his chest since he was a little boy in Norway, made me very confident that I was in great company. He's such a kind and soulful person who has a deep appreciation and wants to dialogue intimately about the journey of an actor. He's not someone who's going to just tell you what to do, where to stand, and how to say it. He really wants to help you get in there and understand what it is that you're trying to do, and he's willing to have lengthy conversations about it. And I'm very excited to see him. I haven't gotten to see him in a long time, and I know he's halfway around the world, so I hope I get to sit in the sacred space that is the cinema with him in the dark at some point and see this movie together. This was hands down the most difficult, physically demanding film shoot of my career. I was bruised, banged around, bumped every day in some way or another. Extreme heat when we were in Malta, working on the deck of the ship for the daytime shots. Exteriors, it was still hot as hell while we were down there. And then when we were in Berlin, remember, I'm a tall guy and we're working in spaces that are small. There's lots of bumping your head and you're fighting and you're wrestling and you're crawling around on the wooden floors. And our amazing production team created spaces that felt very authentically like being in the hold of a ship. But that is a rugged terrain to be fighting the Prince of Darkness within. So I would say I was doing boxing training several times a week with my wife, with the trainer in Germany. I was working out and trying to do as much yoga as possible, keeping myself stretched and fit. And I love that part of the process. I love bringing the physicality into the work because I think it informs the voice and the characterization so much. But it was hard. I'm not gonna lie. Like there were days where I dragged myself home and just sat with ice packs and thought, am I getting too old for this? No, we haven't. I mean, I get to be part of a tradition that is almost 100 years old when you look at the Universal Dracula tradition. I mean, Todd Browning and Bela Lugosi and what they created back in 1932 or whatever, to now, and all the iterations of Dracula that we've been able to see, and the way that a lot of us imagine Dracula with a flowing cape and a red pendant and being a alluring, sensual symbol of seduction is completely now reverting back to the core bestial, basic, most monstrous elements that Stoker writes about in the book. And Dracula in our film is the scariest Dracula probably that's ever been put on screen. I think that we've been missing that. And I think it's time we make Dracula scary again. So I'm grateful to be a part of a film that does make Dracula so scary again. And what makes him so skin-crawlingly terrifying is that not only is he a great hunter and he's able to prey upon the crew one by one and hunt like a master hunter and rip throats out and drink blood and do whatever he needs to do to satiate his hunger, but he seems to get this sick, twisted kind of pleasure, this arousal out of toying with his food, out of almost feeding upon the psychic fear that he's creating on this boat. That's so intense and visceral, and I can't wait for audiences to sit in dark movie theaters and scream their little hearts out. Things that scare me the most in real life, finality, mortality, what lies beyond. I think about, losing the people that I love. I'm terrified of people that are willing to throw their full force, be it socially, economically, or physically, against things, especially people or the environment, without the benefit of information. It scares me so much that in human nature, people can be so rapid to the attack without ever informing themselves as to what they're attacking about. Human nature is one of the most horrifying things that's ever existed in the universe, and it's also a beautiful thing. So that terrifies me. I'm scared of the fact that I love this life and I love humanity, but I also am terrified of it, and people scare the crap out of me. I think that the thing that's the most frustratingly scary about this universe is that some dark force in it seems hell-bent and convinced that it's just pushing people to this false belief that they're alone, and that is this kind of bizarre, sick trick that everybody at some point or another, if not constantly, falls prey to. And I love that I get to be a storyteller, because I think when we do it really well, we have little glimpsey moments, little bursts of light where people sitting in the audience feel recognized, they feel seen, and they feel a little less alone for a minute. So even in something as, I guess on the surface, simple and fun as a Dracula picture, a scary movie, a genre horror film, can achieve that, and that's what that's the light that I'm constantly reaching for, I guess, as an actor.
Well, it's a number of things. André Øvredal, when he contacted me, I'd loved the autopsy of Jane Doe, and it's almost like a play, and it's these people locked in this room, and for him to be able to raise that tension in a very confined space, which is essentially what's happening with this movie on this, well, although a much bigger space and a bigger canvas for André this time. And I just thought, okay, I want to work with this guy, and I have this weird attraction to horror movies. I don't know what I've done. The Mummy. I did a wonderful movie called Dog Soldiers about werewolves. And when Dracula comes along, you've got to be a hard man to turn down Dracula. And it was a really, really lovely script. And you're right about me being fussy. It's why I didn't arrive for these interviews in a Ferrari. To my accountant's horror, I'm a little fussier than I should be. But I just love the idea of these people being trapped on the boat and having this monster. And as well as that, the history and heritage attached to this. And as I was saying before, less than a kilometre from where I live is the birthplace, the house that Bram Stoker was born in. So I consider him my neighbour. It's a bit of a stretch of the imagination, but, there you go. And one of the other big things is that I thought Universal were being very brave because, as you could see, they spent money on this. This is a lot of money. They wanted this to have scope and have the bigness of this at the beginning when we're in Bulgaria, and then to shrink it down and make this unbearable claustrophobia. And one other thing, when you're spending that kind of money, and I have to admire Universal for taking a chance on this, is there's no movie stars in this. It's not a vehicle for some, huge marquee name. Most of the actors in it are theatre-based, and it's a proper ensemble, which is difficult to write for. That all of the characters are beautifully drawn. And on top of that, you've got a monster like Dracula running around the ship killing people. For me, it was a no-brainer. It was a very easy yes. Well, Dracula is never going to go away. The book is wonderfully written, that he can be interpreted as a creative sees fit. If you look, our monster is very, very different from Christopher Lee and a lot of the other interpretations of the Dracula character. But those films are wonderful. They're still very watchable. It's the gothic aspect of it, this darkness, this kind of Victoriana. It's very seductive, and speaking of seduction, when you've got there was a wonderful I can't remember the name of the French actor who played him on a BBC thing years and years ago, and he's this very attractive, very suave character, which is a perfectly legitimate interpretation if you're going to make it interesting. But our Dracula is a beast. He's a monster. He's an insatiable appetite for human beings. And he operates without conscience, completely amoral, and is horrific, as you've seen. And those kind of odds against a ship full of people who are not military men, who are in some cases barely literate, and they're trapped on this ship and trying to fend off or protect themselves from this beast. It just said to me that this is great material and great stuff to do a really, really good movie. Oh, most definitely, because we went back to the book. There has been a trend of making Dracula this kind of enigmatic, slightly sexy character. that people fall under the spell of and are seduced by his powers. In our case, our guy will rip you asunder and will take different forms. You don't know which Dracula you're going to meet, and that's directly, coming from the book. We're going back to what Bram Stoker's imagination put on the page, and that's what we're after. Yeah, he's a guy. I mean, what attracted me to this, I wanted to, because logic would tell you that the captain should, when the merd hits the van, you should imagine that the leader, the captain of the boat, would step up, be the authoritative one, make the good decisions, and come up with plans. My captain is not like that. He's the head of a merchant vessel. They deliver goods from, parts of Eastern Europe back to. He's not a military man, and he's not a wartime leader. He's not a man that will step up to the plate. He's ready for retirement. He's got his grandson with him, and he wants peace and wants to retire to a small cottage in Ireland somewhere, and that's not allowed. So I like the humanness of that. The man is not a hero, and our wonderful Corey Hawkins is just fantastic in the movie. And leaders come from the least likely places. You don't know who the leaders are going to be and the heroes are going to be until disaster strikes. And Captain Elliot is not one of those. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, we thought I promised his mother that I'd look after him. In my mind, the mother had passed away, and he had the responsibility of this. It's all he has left of his daughter. Is this beautiful son who's full of life and vibrancy, and really wants to look after him and put him in school and all when his retirement comes around, and of course he's not allowed that. And I just like that everything is taken off him, and it's one of the things that makes it human. That it's not somebody turning around look what they did, let's get revenge. He begins to fall apart, as many of us mere humans probably do, and I just think that added to the tension that these people were very human. Not a bunch of heroes who let's make a plan and defeat the monsters. They just didn't know what to do, whether God was doing it to them, whether the presence of a woman was doing it to them. The superstitions come out, and the arguments start, and all that sort of thing. And the claustrophobia of being on that boat with this monster running rampage. I just thought it was a great take on this whole genre. Well, that's the idea. You have to get, if you're going to be outrageous with your monsters, the best way, and in fact the only way, to suspend an audience disbelief is to make the people as human as possible. Then you can go along with the drama and suspend your disbelief that much more. You got to care about these people, and I think you do care about these people on this boat. They're just unfortunate. They picked up the wrong cargo at the wrong time. Oh, you need somebody who knows what they're doing. You need somebody who's able to stretch the tension. You need somebody who's able to guide an audience through the fear avenue, and reward that. And it's like I say, hats off to Universal for. It would have been very easy to go with some very, very well known movie star, marquee name, to hang their hat on, but they didn't. They got a wonderful bunch of theatre people and actors, and made this an ensemble piece, and I think hats off to Universal for doing that. Absolutely, 100%, and also yes, and gave us the budget to give the scope on this thing. It's not everything happening in 3 rooms. You could see, I mean, they spent forever building that. That's a full-size ship. We did 1.5 ships, I think, in Malta in the tank, and then in Berlin. We did all the interiors, and it was just wonderful to see the money spent on the production. Well, there was all we did when we went to Rostock, and we went out to see these ships at work, and there was also the people who built this ship. I mean, all their Christmases came at the same time. A Hollywood studio saying, "How would you guys, these wonderful shipping nerds who love these old boats?" I mean, it must have been wonderful when Universal called and said, "How would you like to build a ship?" And I'm sure they went through the roof. And their enthusiasm and their love of what they're doing. And it's like, I'm sure you'll probably be talking to David. David's character, this Polish character, like he says, he's just basically born, lived, and will probably die on a boat. That's his life. For a lot of these guys, that's the only way they can live their lives. They have routine. They do their work, they go to bed, they're together. That's their family. And I think in a lot of cases, a lot of people who work in the marine environment, or even perhaps the military and stuff like that, that's the life they know they can live with. I think a lot of these people, they can't handle city life, or they can't handle, it's just not good for them. And these ships are their safe spaces. That they just know what they have to do, and life is simple for them. And then if you throw into that the arrival of Dracula, I think you've got drama. 100%. And I think it's very clever the way they did it. I mean, it's, he goes over. Oh, we've got hold on. Give us a sec. We've got a coffee machine cleaning itself in the background. Well, you better plug that out. I think it's underneath. Yeah, I love the character, Corey's character, Clemens, who is, a qualified man from a highly respectable college in England, and when goes over to, take his post, and as soon as they see the colour of him, they go, not here, pal. And he's in trouble. He was going to start a new life and gets rejected. And then when he joins us, as you say, he earns the trust, the respect, and Elliot loves him. Because he can discuss books with him, he can discuss philosophy with him. He's just delighted for the company. And then, as we see, as the drama unfolds and the fear and the danger unfolds, Clemens, as the hero, surfaces. And I love the idea of that the hero emerges, and it is Corey's character. It's wonderful. I love that. There's something slightly old-fashioned about it. But then again, Dracula's kind of old-fashioned. And I mean that in the best sense, not, 100%. It just lends itself to cinema so well as a medium. Horror and stretching the elastic and the tension. And you have to remember, when we were in Germany, in Babelsberg, I've never known what the right pronunciation is, 100 years before, Max Schreck was playing Dracula in Nosferatu in that very studio. So we kind of felt a real kind of responsibility here to try and, do as best we can, but also honour that history. And that's over 100 years. I mean, from the very early stages of cinema, horror has been a huge part of it. It's the roller coaster ride that cinema can and horror can bring to an audience, and it just lends itself. It's always going to be a part of cinema, and quite a few first-time directors make a name for themselves doing horror, because it's a wonderful way to show your skills, and it's incredibly technical. And enormously enjoyable. We still love going to the cinema to have our wits frightened out of us, and that will never stop. Well, usually my wife. No, what scares me in real life, my impending death. That's basically what scares me. Nothing really. I can't think of. I don't know. The environment. Politics, don't get me onto it. But politics and the environment, they're the two things that scare me.
We were just looking for a great actor to portray Clemens.
You dress like a learned man.
University of Cambridge. I know my way around the boat.
Corey is very engaged. He's thinking all the time. It really felt like he could portray a charismatic character and be a lead.
You realize how hard it is and how in shape these guys must have been. Get knocked over and knocked down, and water's like literally in your boot. The great part is that if you look at the images and it's just magic, man. It's magic.
He's coming!